All right, pod fans, welcome back to No Coast Defenders. If at any point you see Stan just drop out of the screen, don't be too shocked. He's battling through a fever, much like many of the NBA guys are battling through nagging injuries, especially. So, yeah, let's get into some No Coast Defendering. Any quick comic book news from either of you guys before we get into Loki?
I don't have any this week. However, everybody's freaking out about the picture of Hugh Jackman and Kevin Feige. It's just a picture. It's just for fun. No, Wolverine is not coming.
Yeah. I mean, Kevin Feige came out and confirmed that was Abomination fighting Wong. So we can stop saying that people are just incredibly racist and think everyone looks like Wong who uses magic. And other than that, nothing much.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy that he needed to confirm that because he's listed in the IMDb in the movie. Like,
yeah, it was a quick 2-second search
really?
to verify.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, which means that someone probably looked at it and still accused someone of being racist because unfortunately that's how people are.
Yeah.
I didn't see too much. It's kind of slow right now news-wise. So, yeah.
I noticed that Disney had a presser with Black Widow being hailed as the greatest MCU moment yet, and that to me says, "Oh, this probably isn't going to be as good as I'm hoping." But
I want it to be good because I don't want to go through because you've thrown the cover theory out in trailers, and it of course does have a Nirvana cover. So I want it to be great, so it just smashes that theory you have because I don't want to watch a bunch of trailers to confirm which ones had covers.
So I watched this guy on YouTube, and his name is Chris Stuckman, and he does very well, very nice in-depth movie reviews, and he gave the movie a C because his main point being like they made it. It felt like they made it because they had to. There wasn't a director with a story to tell like Ryan Coogler or any of the other Jon Favreau, any of the other directors in the MCU, and and that's really all I'll say about it. But there's more.
My buddy Colby said, "Well, it's better than Wonder Woman 84."
I mean, that's
I really, part of me doesn't like that it's already being compared to just a female lead movie. I'd like to look at it as just a movie on its own. Regardless of who the lead is in it, but that's where it's drawing comparisons. And I like her portrayal of Natasha, and it seems lighthearted enough to at least be an entertaining movie, I guess I could say. So I'm going into it with some hope. I have tickets to see it in a little pod area, so I have some hope. And if it sucks, whatever. At least they gave us something, you know.
Well, and Florence Pugh is great, and to this day, if you listen to the Scrubs rewatch podcast with Zach Braff and Donald Faison. Zach Braff a couple months ago mentioned because she was in Wrestling with My Family, Florence Pugh, she still to this day puts Zach Braff in wrestling holds and finds it amusing because he can't get out. So she can handle the physicality stuff. So
yeah, nice. I had only ever seen her in Midsummer, which is a phenomenal horror movie if you've never seen it. And she really brings her A game, especially with that movie.
I think she's great. I'm excited to see that passing of the mantle in this film and where she pops up in the future. All right. Now, the last couple of weeks, we haven't done Marry, Date, Chill, but I have a fun one for you guys this week.
Okay.
All right. So there's not going to be a connection because it's going to be obvious. So Dan doesn't have to try and rack his brain to get the connection here. I'll give his fever-addled brain a little break, but Marry, Date, Chill. Any three of the Loki variants we've seen so far?
I have to try and remember them all.
All right. So far, of course, we have Loki. We have Sylvie. We have Kid Loki. We have what they're billing as classic Loki. And then boastful Loki was the black Loki who looked like he was holding some version of Mjolnir. So I first saw him as worthy Loki before someone actually like started listing what they were credits. And of course, you can't forget they're calling it Gator Loki, but it wasn't listed in the credits. So I want to say it's a crocodile and not an alligator because if you're a Loki, you're full of croc. So
Got him.
I'm thinking of this croc Loki. So
I'm gonna marry
What?
reptile Loki because when it passes, I can smoke it on the smoker.
Please, anyone in the comments or podcast, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure it is an alligator because it has a rounded snout versus a crocodile that's pointed.
you're probably right. I think it is an alligator, but I wanted to make the croc joke.
Oh, but well, by all means.
That's the one I'm gonna marry because I want to smoke it when it dies. I'm gonna date Sylvie. I think there's a lot of stories to be told there. I think we could have a lot of fun late nights on the water just listening to the many trials and tribulations. I'm gonna chill with Loki. I feel like he'd get on my nerves after a while and need a little break, and then pick up the friendship, months later. So I think that's my 3.
Tim, how about you?
This is definitely a curveball. I wasn't expecting this. There's so many possibilities. I think I'll date. I'm gonna go a little off the grid and I'll say Tour de France Loki.
Okay.
Because once he gets busted in his steroid scandal, I will, I can just drop him. I will chill with Croc Loki. And what's the last one? Mary?
Yeah.
I'll marry Sylvie.
Okay.
Can't go wrong.
I'm going to marry boastful Loki. I mean, he's worthy, so why wouldn't you marry him? I'm going to. I'm gonna date classic Loki simply because I want to see what I can learn from an older, wiser version of Loki. And then I'm just gonna chill with Sylvie. I think she's been emotionally damaged since she was a child on the run from the TVA. So I think she needs a friend.
Work.
Yeah, that was a good one. Very good one.
All right. So we're gonna start with you, Tim.
Okay.
What do you think of the episode 4 of Loki?
I finally got a chance to rewatch an episode finally, and actually get to pay attention to it. And nothing's really changed. I'm a little bit more indifferent to this one as I was the last one, but I'm still pretty disappointed. As these episodes go on, I'm just realizing that these shows aren't stories they can tell in less than 10 episodes. The TVA, like, I know Dan says all the time that, the TVA, isn't really represented too much in the comics, but now's your chance to actually do some world building and flesh it out the way you want it to. And they're just not doing it. And these stories are just way too big to be able to fit everything in there. So to get into the nitty gritty of things, the first thing I noticed right off the bat is after, spoiler talk and all this, after Mobius gets pruned, the dialogue goes to shit. It's so, like, not cringy, but it's so cliche. Telling the timekeepers to do their worst, and literally everything that comes out of Rabona's mouth, it's just doesn't sit with me right, and it's been pretty disappointing. Owen Wilson was fucking great in this episode. He really showed a new depth of emotion to the character that we haven't seen in all ends of the spectrum, really. And I mean, Sylvie's there. I mean, and the thing that really disappointed me the most was that they made the very strange decision to just sit there and watch B-15, Hunter B-15, as she was going into her memories instead of like going in with Sylvie and exploring those memories. And it was just very odd. So overall, it was different, and I can appreciate that. There was more to look at, but overall, I'm just so disappointed.
Dan,
Man, one of these weeks I'm going to come on here with something good to say. It just completely missed it for me. It feels very uninspired. And like Tim said, once Mobius was out, it got really campy. So it went from being the show with some really smart writing, and though I think it's been overdone, it still was good writing. To just a place where we had 2 episodes left, and the story is just quite lazy in my opinion at this point.
Yeah.
And it's not that I need a surprise with every turn or anything like that. It's just I don't know. It's just uninspired. And so after watching it, I would say my mother-in-law is not watching the show. She's like, "Hey, I want to see what this is about. I got nothing to watch." So I watched them consecutively with her, and it definitely hits differently when you watch them in a row as opposed to when you watch them weekly. And so I started thinking, like, what if this was like a movie? And so my buddy Colby from Colby told me, he does all the movie reviews. He's been liking the show, but not loving it. I go, what if they pared it down to a 2.5-hour movie, though? And he goes, that'd be epic because there'd be nothing wasted. It would feel like it has purpose. When you end these episodes, I'm not left with like, oh man, I can't wait till next week. I'm like, that's it. So it's kind of where I am. We knew that the TVA wasn't run by these giant whatever they were. And seeing that head fall, I guess for some, they're like, oh, whoa. And I was like, yeah, we kind of saw that coming maybe an episode prior to this. I don't think we're going to get Kang in the series at this point. It just doesn't seem like it's going to fit with the arc that they're having. But each arc for each episode, it feels very movie-like, and then it just stops. And so for me, that's a miss. I've found the acting to be quite great on this show. It's just the stories where it's losing me.
It seems to be the issue with most of these Disney Plus shows is the writing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I'm rewatching WandaVision, and I'm on like episode 6, and that's where you start to see the writing kind of fall off, and they go for more of the action drive. So
now, what episode was that? Was that the Halloween episode?
Yes, that was 5 or 6. That's where I am,
yeah.
And that's where you kind of see it start to take a dip. And I'm wondering, because they were originally going to be like one-offs, and then they were for world building, and now they're all completely interconnected. And so I think that part of that's causing it to lose some of its creativity. I think Loki would be much different if it was just a one-off on its own instead of trying to, fit into everything else. And I think that's a detriment to the show. But what are they going to do? They got to make this money. They got to do it. And seeing that season 2 is all but in production, I don't know if I'm excited about it, to be honest, but
no.
Sylvie's kind of wearing on me at this point. I don't really care for Sylvie, and I know a lot of people are excited about the band of Lokis, but for me, we're gonna have 2 episodes now where it's, hey, trust us, and then they all work together, and then they all reunite, and then they kick ass in the end. Like it's already there for me, so it's not like I'll be that shocked or fascinated. But sorry to bring so much negativity. I'm hoping to bring some more positivity once we conclude it all.
Well, I don't ever tell anyone their opinion is wrong, but I do think you are both crazy. I think this episode was fantastic. As far as like the dialogue after Mobius dies, I think if it was too witty at that point, you could have the reverse criticism as, oh, Loki's supposed to be distraught. He made a real friend for the first time in his life, and he watched him evaporate in front of him. How can he be so witty? So I think there's 2 sides of the same coin. I actually always hate in that moment of grief or trauma where someone is too witty. It just feels campy to me. So I'm okay with how the dialogue shifted because Loki's not dialoguing with anyone at that point. He's making a quick point.
It wasn't just that moment though; it was the rest of the episode.
Yeah,
like it just felt lazy for me after that.
Oh, and it wasn't about what he was saying or the moment he was in. It was just their choice of lines that they chose to give him was just uninspired.
Yeah, they didn't even have to have any lines. I mean, he's such a good actor; just facial expressions would have been fine enough. But I don't know.
Do robots recognize facial expressions?
What do you
I
mean?
think. I mean, I feel like he has to have those lines because he's talking to robots, and there has to be some dialogue there. I think there's a lot of small things. I mean, when talking to Sylvie, the fake timekeepers say you are of the same or you are of the same as us or what I don't remember the exact same quote, but there's definitely like a reference to Sylvie being like one and the same as them. And one of the theories, of course, is that like it's
Oh,
King Loki's actually in control of it and stuff, and so you
Yeah.
need that
he,
line. Um,
they said something about her being a child of the timekeepers.
yes, but they didn't say timekeepers. They said child of us. So they didn't like say timekeeper, or maybe they did say
I think
timekeepers,
they
but
did. Yeah.
okay. But like if it's Loki controlling these fake androids, like yes, she is. So I think there's just so much small stuff. I think the whole like the time prison with Loki was brilliant, where you see his reckoning, where he realizes that why
Yeah.
he acts the way he does, and even the you said something in one of your Facebook like things, Dan, about how things can be done and undone with time.
Mhm.
I think everything they've done so far has been set up perfectly. So I don't know, like, yes, the thing about any time, anything is you can just have shenanigans where nothing matters. But
Yeah.
I think they've layered everything so beautifully. Even that end credit where, oh, Loki's just in another universe is set up in the beginning when Sylvie asked if losing is what makes a Loki, and he says, we may lose, but we never die. I mean, they tied it in, they bookended the episode with that speech. The time cell where Loki realizes he's never loved, that makes him watching Mobius go that much harder for him because this is legitimately the first friendship he has made. This is a man who was abandoned by the Frost Giants, adopted by a father who never really wanted him, a brother who he doesn't have a relationship with that's positive, although that's the nature of the trickster god is he creates that. And I mean, even that spike when the two Loki variants are clearly like falling for each other, and you get that massive time
Yeah.
boner. Time boner was my favorite way I saw it described, and it's just how perfect for the god of chaos, the ultimate narcissist, to fall in love with a version of himself. It's just super interdimensional masturbation, and of course that would spike even in an apocalypse event where they're not supposed to spike. So I just think everything's layered so well to the smallest detail. And they started. I mean, one of the first things you pointed out was the soda tin. Of course, that's the soda he's drinking because that's the time Mobius is plucked from.
Yeah.
I mean, I'd mentioned how weird I thought the multiple rings was. Of course it is because they are probably resetting Mobius because he's such a great agent over and over again. So he just does the same things, same patterns, gets to a point where he discovers what he is. They have to reset him. Like everything is just layered so brilliantly.
Yet it all feels so purposeless for me. Like that's at the end of the day, that's what it is. Yeah, there's all this little stuff, but it's just the payoff just doesn't feel worth it for me, to be quite honest. I it's sad, but I almost just don't care how it ends up, where we are now. For me, that feels bizarre because this is a show I was most looking forward to.
Well, that's one of the things I was wondering with you specifically, Dan, and maybe it's infiltrated in Tim after you guys did the Marvel rewatch and everything. But I pitched that you were expecting something in WandaVision that you weren't getting and it hindered your enjoyment. I think you just came into so much hype for what Loki could be and what you thought it should be, even though like you've been very clear, like you don't know what's going to happen. But
no, I liked that element, and I still kind of do like that element. I just feel like nothing's happening. I know there's all this little stuff that's building to something, but at this point, with 2 episodes left, there's nothing, no grand picture that they can put together that I'm going to be like, whoa, this is so worth it. No matter what happens. And I had zero expectations of the show other than enjoying Tom Hiddleston, which I have done.
Well, you just said grand thing that you say, whoa, if like you went in thinking an MCU Disney Plus show was going to give you a whoa moment at the end, that's an expectation you set yourself up for failure.
No, I at least just expected to give me some enjoyment. It hasn't like at all. It's just fallen completely flat for me. And like I said, when I watched them consecutively, it held a bit more gravity than it does on its own week to week. I finished these episodes. I'm like, oh, okay, what else? And it's not enjoyable for me. Whereas, there are moments in Scarlet Witch where, I was completely wrong, but I love that I was wrong because I still enjoyed what was happening. And I don't know what the difference is. This is the one show I wasn't expecting anything out of and made no predictions for it. I was just going to sit there and enjoy it. And it's not Thor Dark World to me, but it exists.
Now for me, I didn't have any expectations going into it because, frankly, I wasn't a Loki fan. By the time we got to Infinity War, I was don't at me, but I was kind of glad he died because I felt that they were using him to death, especially up until the first Avengers. Like they just weren't using much of anyone else, and so going into this, my disappointment comes with the fact that, like I mentioned with our episode last week, you're dealing with a police department for time. There are so many possibilities for just solid mind fucks and just gorgeous visuals like Doctor Strange and Quantum, Ant-Man and Wasp style visuals that just haven't been used. And it's, for me, it's just that the show isn't living up to its potential. I don't think. You're dealing with an endless amount of bureaucracy. Yeah, you know what I'm trying to say.
Bureaucracy is a terrible thing and a terrible word.
Yeah, but how, taking away the story that exists, I could just picture him in a frenzy, just running past countless, endless numbers of these, the desks, the filing cabinets, the libraries. I just really wanted them to keep hammering home, at least outside of the first episode, just how small he really is. So that way, when they do progress the plot and develop him more into the character that they want him to be towards the end of the series, it'll have that much more of an impact. But I can't, just like with everything else that we've gotten up until now, I can't complain too much. We're very thankful to have these things.
It's interesting.
Yeah. No, go ahead. I was done.
Oh, well, I didn't mean to interrupt you, man. I'm sorry. I just,
no, you're good. You're good.
I had said that the first episode of this series was some of the best stuff Marvel ever gave us. And so from the jump, it was amazing. And there's just been a huge disconnect for me since then, because the first episode was a preview of what we're about to get. I was like, holy shit, I'm going to have to hold on to my ass for this one. And then the whole tone and mood and
there was
so drastically from that
major shift.
Yeah. And that's where the letdown was for me, because it wasn't my expectations. It just became something very different than what we were presented with, because what we were presented with was some of the best stuff that the MCU has brought us.
And we still don't know if that Kablooey is related to Sylvie.
Mm-hmm.
I think the Kablooey, and I just listened to this morning a podcast on heist movies, so forgive me for the term, but it's been used with Marvel's. Kablooey, I think, was a MacGuffin for a couple episodes. But
I love MacGuffins.
But it did lead us to RexCorp, which I thought was just this brilliant satire of Walmart in itself and where we're going in the world. So I don't know. I think it comes down to, I wasn't expecting all these giant set pieces with filing cabinets or new worlds that blow our minds. I think I was expecting what we're getting now. And I was never expecting, even after the first episode, as much as I love that dialogue, I was never expecting it to maintain that throughout, because I could be wrong here, but I think if we just kept up that pace through 4 episodes, everyone would be sick of that as well. So I think we needed. You say that, but we'd have to see it to know that for sure. And I feel like there needs to be change of pace things. That's why I am in a slight minority how much I loved episode 3 in the train, because I thought that was a brilliant change of pace for me. But this is what I love. Like, I love the small things. I mean, hell, I just admitted I was listening to a podcast on like heist movies. So I love like noir fiction. I love like, oh man, I can't believe I missed that little thing. So I don't need some grand thing, because that's not life in my mind. So I just love how, even in the vastness of all of time and space, these are people having people conversations, and there's like building on it. And to me, that's always what a superhero story should be, is people with extraordinary abilities.
That's never been what Loki's been about. So that's the difference too. It's, when then I get that we're getting a different version of Loki, but even the comics, like, it's all mischief, it's all, shenanigans. And so they can develop a character while still having some of that stuff, and they can have somebody who can form a bond with somebody and still keep the Loki stuff, which is all grand. It's all from the pages of the comics, it's all just beyond belief, the stuff you look at. And even the TVA stuff in the comics for their brief history, it's all very much over the top and grandiose. So, if they want to give us that story and everything, that's part of what comes with it. And there's no like buddy cop story coming with Loki, regardless of which iteration it is. And so that's kind of where they lost me, based on who Loki as a character has been in the MCU and on the pages of the comics. And, if they want to do these different variants, cool, but do it Loki style.
And see, I loved the Loki change, especially in context where the thing where they focused on in that first episode that really caught his attention was the death of his mother, which, had he not fled that timeline, he would have caused. So in the life of a person who's been abandoned over and over again, he saw the death of the one person he had that real connection with. So that's going to humanize you. And especially, like, I remember WandaVision, when we were writing about it, I pitched to you guys that this was about Wanda's grief. And then I pitched that it was acceptance in Falcon and Winter Soldier, that there's always this one big human emotion and feeling they're reckoning with. And Loki's is about self. It was from the beginning. All the dialogue in that first episode is what makes a Loki a Loki. And we are seeing that boiled down to the very, very basics. And it involved a Loki falling in love with another Loki. But that's what this has been about. It's always been about what makes a Loki. And we're seeing it. Loki, we've seen our Loki fall in love with one person, and it's a version of himself, and befriend one person, and it's an agent who he just likes to spar verbally with, which is reminiscent of the pranks that he would have with Thor. That's how he connects. That's who Loki is in his essence.
Yeah, it just very much feels like the show about nothing for me at the end of the day. I could talk it in circles, but coming away with it, like, none of it means anything to me what I'm getting from this show, outside of the acting. I think it's just written. I think it's written very poorly in terms of story, because where they're trying to develop these character arcs and where the story is going is very disjointed. So you can have those small moments, but they don't feel like they fit in the grand scheme of things either. It's almost like you have one team handling Loki, one team handling the rest of the story, and then trying to bring it together. Like that group project where one person does all the work and everybody has to read off their cards for the shit that they throw in the last minute. That's what it feels like to me when I watch it. And as a professor who sat through so many of those presentations, that's like the first thing that I gravitated to. I'm like, all right, so one person really did their job and the rest came in at 11:59 when it was due at midnight.
I'm curious if you have an example of where the Loki stuff doesn't fit in with the grand scheme of things.
So yeah, we're getting this Loki development, but then we have all these other distractions going on. We have all of this storyline that just doesn't feel like it's amounting to anything, and doesn't feel like it also amounts to Loki either, because we still have all these other characters. So it's either about Loki or it's about everything else, but they both feel very separate.
Can you give an example of what in Loki doesn't feel like it fits in the whole, though?
Him, the character, everything they're doing with him doesn't feel like it fits with any of the story. Like, there's not one example. It's just the feeling I have going to this. I'm like, all right, cool, this is Loki, and then I get the rest of it going on. I'm like, none of this. But it's just very disjointed. It doesn't feel like it's part of the same show.
And see, I feel the exact opposite. I think it ties in beautifully. So
Yeah, I don't know. I've never felt this much disappointment for something that I was so excited about.
it's so interesting how we are all watching the same thing and taking different opinions and views of it.
Yeah, the wild thing, 'cause I have a lot of friends who are like, on the review side and they get all the sneak peeks and all this stuff. And so oftentimes I'll get like, they're not allowed to divulge any information, but I'll get, a general overview and things like that. And it's funny because I've been on par with most of them, and then none of them have actually loved it. And so it's been interesting because I rarely agree with them. Actually, they often are big Marvel stands that they can do no wrong. I don't think that's the case at all. So to hear their takes on this, it's been pretty interesting as well. Which is why when I pitched the movie thing, it seemed like no matter what, people thought like, yeah, that'd be much better. Simply because it's not starting, stopping. I have a friend who waited to just binge them all, like when they were 4 or 5, and he loved every second of it. And I think it's because it feels much more complete. It's just not the way that they have this arc going. It's just not a week to week show, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I'm the opposite point. I think I would hate this as a movie, but again, like I admitted, like I loved every bit of the episode with the train. So I think we need all that stuff. It's interesting you say about the friends who like do the critical thing, because if you look at like Rotten Tomatoes, this episode is 76%. Whereas if you look at IMDb, which is going to be all like fans going to rate it, 94%, and it's the highest episode.
And you look at the numbers too.
Do you happen to know what the other episodes came in on Rotten Tomatoes?
Rotten Tomatoes, the first one is, hold on, I just had it up. The first one here was it was a 94 on Rotten Tomatoes.
I can dig that.
The first one was the highest. The second one was right behind it. Then the third was the lowest, and that was at like a 72. And then this one was at a 76. Whereas on IMDb, this one's a 9.4. The first one's 9.1, like 8.7 for the second, and 8 even, I think, or 7.9 for the third. So, I mean, critically and for just the average man, it seems that third episode is the low point for everyone.
So the thing with Loki, though, I mean, on Rotten Tomatoes, it's only based on 54 reviews out of how many people have watched it. So
it's not many. I know there's a shit ton of people covering this at The Ringer. They basically around Loki launched a whole network. So they've got like someone writing reviews, and they've got 2 different shows talking about it. And they've loved all the episodes. They were even in on the third, but they all loved it. They've had writers from Vanity Fair and Rolling Stone come on, and so it's all pro that. But obviously, once again, I'm talking 8 people who love these episodes. Small sample size, and even if we go here with our small sample size, I'm in the super minority at 33% of this podcast loves it. So.
Well, I have a reviewer friend who stepped away from reviewing these and watching them he wants to wait until the end now, because he says that as segments, it's just not working for him. He doesn't want to have that for his final review. And so he's actually taking a pay cut because he's waiting until it ends instead of giving a weekly review once it airs, simply because he wants to see if he enjoys it more that way.
Yeah, it's just so interesting. I will stand for Loki as the series, but I don't mind that I'm in the minority on this podcast for it. So if we want a larger sample size so we can even it up, my brother, who's not on this podcast, told me he thinks you're crazy that Loki's great. So,
well, even if you saw my Facebook post, like how split was it? It was pretty much 50-50 for.
It was pretty split, but I also noticed that it was just people that there's a general disconnect, but don't have any examples of where it's like disconnecting for them, which makes me think you guys are missing something.
No, it's just a feeling I have.
No, like I said, I'll tell you guys are crazy, but I will never tell you your opinions are wrong. So if you're feeling a general disconnect, that general disconnect's there.
I have my opinions, and yeah, I've been agreeing with Dan most of this time, but I'm moving forward cautiously optimistic. My one hope is that going into the second season, they never stop world building, because there's just so much to show and to tell and to represent with this property. That I just hope they don't stop.
The second one in production, essentially, but not announced yet, which is fun for a second season. But that's really the MCU way. So I'm really curious. I think in the final episodes of the previous two MCU shows were kind of the most disappointing thing because they didn't quite wrap up super well. And we've speculated, we don't know how much is that like pandemic related with rush schedules or how much is just it's different to execute a 2-hour movie versus a 6 to 8 hour series. But I'm hopeful that this wraps up in a way that like everything ties together. But then again, it could be a big letdown as well. So I've accepted that it could be a letdown, and I just enjoyed 5.5 of the episodes. I even, as much as you guys know, I hate the end credits. I did pop huge for this end credit, and only partially because I made my first lock Kid Loki. So to see Kid Loki, and not just Kid Loki, but Kid Loki holding an alligator Kid Loki or alligator Loki, like this. I mean, there was the writer Daniel Chin did a whole article asking questions about alligator Loki. So this is fun. I'm excited for you two with Pops for Patience when you guys are able to give kids like these Loki gators. Like it's silly, it's cheap, but much like with Grogu in The Mandalorian, it's cute, it's fun. Not everything needs to be like world remaining. I do wonder because one of the things is the payoff. There's not the payoff each episode, and you're not sure you want to wait for the next. In the world of streaming, how much is that causing? Like we got this in the 90s where everything was weekly.
Yeah.
I think we'd all feel different about that.
Well, my thing with these episodes, it doesn't feel like a cliffhanger when it ends. I think if it felt like it was an actual cliffhanger, I'd be like, oh, okay. It just doesn't have that feel to me. It feels just like unfinished business. Or like
it feels abrupt.
Yeah, and like it's almost like yes, we can stream now, but when we first started streaming and everything buffered every 5 minutes, it felt like it just was stuck on buffering for me at the end of these episodes, which also leaves me with that sour taste in my mouth week to week, which is why I just need the conclusion of it. The one episode literally was episode 3 where it just ended, this cataclysmic event, and then it's just black screen. Okay.
Well, and that is your classic cliffhanger. Like that is your classic television cliffhanger is Doom, but it doesn't feel like a cliffhanger because we know at least one of those two Lokis has to come out of that episode.
And there's like no wonderment there for it, like cliffhanger is like a whodunit or what's happening. Like there's a sense of wonder where like my mind starts going, I'm like, oh, all right, that just happened.
Well, and the sense of wonder there is supposed to be, are they going to die? How are they going to escape this literal apocalypse?
Yeah.
But the problem is we know they're going to be in the next episode.
And when it's the titular character, it's like, all right, yeah, cool. So let's fast forward and get to some real shit.
To agree with you here, the pruning of Mobius would have been what the fuck, what happened to Mobius moment if we didn't get the end credit scene where we see Loki pop up.
Yep.
Yeah.
But part of that,
because that was beautiful dialogue about how he just kept going, talk about his jet ski right up until the end. Yeah,
it was. I think that could have been, but I heard a good theory about why this happens is if they
what happens,
why they have to show like Loki that instead of just starting the next episode with it is simply because if it's just Mobius they prune, you can say, oh, did he really die? Or is that how they got Owen Wilson? Is he only was actually doing 2 episodes of the 6 episodes? But they're like, well, let's not make the narrative on did we only pay Owen Wilson for 2 episodes? Let's change their narrative to what is pruning actually. And it's not a bad theory, but at the same time, like those 2 guys disappearing, they're coming back at that point, but it would be more interesting to speculate how they're coming back. Now we just know they end up in some alternate dimension.
Yeah, with 2 hours left.
Maybe like the Sakaar of pruning.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Now I will say I'm curious to see what does happen there. Like, is the pruning where you get stuck in this dead dimension until they can actually reset you? Because the pruning is instantaneous. So it would make sense if that's like the battle strategy, if we're going to put you in essentially this holding cell until we can reset you. So
Mhm.
then how did this band of Lokis avoid that, other than the fact that they're Lokis and they seem to avoid TVA agents like it's their jobs? So, and then ultimately, I think that moment where Renslayer says she doesn't remember what Sylvie's Nexus event was, of course she fucking remembers what, like
course.
she went from being a hunter to a judge in
Yeah.
that time. So either that was part of the plan that Sylvie get away, or that's haunted her and it's the one blemish on her record that she had to overcome.
Yeah.
So either way, that moment is big on Renslayer. So the fact that she said just do it, get it over with, and then Sylvie didn't, just I was like, okay, I'm not looking as forward to Renslayer Sylvie dialogue as I would be Loki and Mobius if it was those two in that situation. But I'm really curious, especially. Do you know the story she was play acting when she's taken?
I didn't pay attention. No.
It's the story of the
But
Valkyries stopping
Ella.
Ragnarok.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
like,
Because someone pointed out that there was a wolf there that looked like Fenris.
yeah, so that's what like young Sylvia's play acting is that story, which we got in the third Thor film, and it's just interesting that the Lokis are supposed to be bad. Like Owen Wilson said, you're not the main guy, you're the guy who gets to people where they're going to be. But here, this Sylvie, who from an early age is like relishing in the delights of the world being saved by the Valkyries, is the one who's taken as a child. Like, is the Nexus event that this is a pure-hearted good Loki? It's just,
Yeah.
it's interesting.
You know, one thing I did find interesting with this is, you know how everybody's assigned like their numbers, you know, like Hunter B15 and C20. So Ravona's number is A23. Her
Yeah.
first appearance in the Avengers is 23, and it's also where you get all of the Kang stuff. So I did like that. Not that I'm saying we're getting Kang. I just like that nod of detail of, you know, this comic accuracy there for her first appearance, which makes me. It really makes me hope that we see her in her suit from the comic books because it's a badass suit. That would be pretty awesome.
The suit would be good. One of the theories I've liked is that we're not getting Kang,
Right.
but how there's the Council of Kangs, that we're
Mhm.
just going to get a Council of Lokis, and that's who's controlling the Timekeepers. So they kind of like take that story and twist it.
Yeah, I saw that, and then you know, Kang basically kills all these variants of himself, so and you know he's just a mortis then.
Yeah.
And no, I don't think we'll see that in the show, but I think it'd be cool to have a nod to that. The Loki thing would be interesting too, but I would like to see a nod to that because that would develop him much quicker than I think they're going to. In the grand scheme of things, he's not as big of a bad as this overarching, like, oh, we're gonna make Kang a big bad, like Thanos type thing. He's not that big a deal. So I'd like to see some prior building to him, so it's not like every movie we get a little piece of it, like we did with the Thanos
Right.
build up.
Well, and it's interesting too because Immortus wanted to take over like the TVA, whereas like Kang just used times as a mean for his other conquering. So I think if we see a Kang that is involved with the TVA, it'd kind of be a configuration of both those Kangs.
Yeah.
Because as much as I love how they've eased viewers into comic book mayhem, I don't know that the viewers are ready for that kind of comic book mayhem where there's two Kangs that are pretty similar, but one wants to conquer the TVA, one just likes having time travel. So I could see them both like them just kind of combining the two, much like how it looks like they did Lady Loki and Enchantress, like combined. So.
Yeah. You know, I think I had said I think Renslayer was our bad at one point, and I'm okay with that if that's where they go with this. I just really want to see that suit now.
Yeah.
On a side note.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead. I'm changing the topic.
I was just gonna say Renslayer being the big bad is the most fitting with these previous three series. Like everyone was waiting for Mephisto in the first one, and it was Agnes.
Yeah.
Everyone was waiting for someone else to be the power broker, and then it was just Sharon Carter. So so far the theme of these shows is the big bad is the guy that was obvious from the beginning. But we could get a change up here.
How funny is it going to be when we actually finally get Mephisto in the MCU and where everybody's like, I don't give a shit anymore.
Yeah, it'll be interesting.
But just as a side note, like, am I the only person who gets their mind blown when they realize the ages of these actors. Like Jonathan Majors and Margot Robbie are my age, and to see them doing roles like this is just mind blowing. Not in like a condescending way, like what am I doing with my life, but it's just so weird.
For me, it's less with actors because of everything that goes into stage production and makeup and de-aging and everything. I believe they're any age possible. But for me, it's always pro athletes. Like Dwight Howard and I are exactly the same age. So when he was 22 and playing in the NBA championship, and I'm like, we share a birthday. I'm sitting on a couch eating a brick of cheese watching you play.
You know what gets me? It's when they share like somebody's height and weight of an athlete, and I'm like, oh, I weigh that, but but I don't look anything like them.
Yeah, well, and you guys know how much I love pro wrestling. I'm down to 216, but being like a 220-pound man, like these guys who are huge on the television, I'm like, I have 20 pounds on you. I won't throw his name on here because it's a little bit of shade, but when I worked in Orlando, one of the athletes came in and I'm taller than him by about 2 inches, and I clearly have 40 pounds on him. And so I was just talking pro wrestling with him, and one of the ladies who worked at the bookstore with me was like, wait, you're a pro wrestler? And he's like, yeah. And she's like, how? He's bigger than you. And then she's like, he should be your tag team partner. And I'm like, no, he could kick my ass. And he took it in good grace, but even giants, Matt Morgan, who was also an American Gladiator, is legitimate 6'8". But like seeing him up person, I'm like, you look so much bigger on television. It doesn't help that my roommates at that time were 6'2", 6'3", 6'4", and 3 of my coworkers were over 6'4". So like 6'8" is not a big jump when you're surrounded by giants anyway. But yeah, the age thing is kind of interesting. Like Jonathan Majors, yeah. But age is relevant.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just a number.
All right, you guys ready for the Mephisto Reed Richards lock of the episode?
Sure.
You got one for us, Dan?
We are going to get Renslayer in her suit in the finale.
I think that's a legitimate one. Much like my first one with Kid Loki, I think you're right. Tim, you want to throw one out there for us?
Yeah, I think Kang is getting less and less likely with each episode. I think we're just going to see like a Civil War moment with all the Loki variants versus, the Minutemen.
I can see that, and B-15 is going to be on the side of the Lokis. I'm excited for that.
Yeah.
I'm excited for B-15 and our Loki to have a conversation. I kind of liked the brief exchange we got between them. So now that she had that moment where you see the tears in her eyes where she says, I was happy, I'm kind of glad we didn't see that moment, because whatever moment she was peering into in her memory where she was happy wasn't going to live up to the realization on her face that she was happy once, that she wasn't just this mindless drone. Now for world building sake, like, yes, it could have been interesting to see where in history of time she came from. But that, to me, that little moment with just the little bit of tears in her eyes and then the look on Sylvie's face when she nods, like you can tell that Sylvie's definitely not the big bad in that moment, because that look of sympathy.
Yeah.
But my Mephisto Reed Richards lock of the week is that in the last episode, we are going to end up in a dimension with Squadron Supreme, and we will then spin off into a Squadron Supreme series because Feige wants to shove it in DC's face that he can do a Justice League series better than they ever could.
I'd be in on that.
I don't know how I'm going to get more ridiculous than that one for next week. I will work on it for you guys, though.
Yeah. And going into this next episode and ultimately the finale, I just hope they step up their game with the action. This past action scene with Loki and Sylvie versus the Minutemen in the Timekeeper's Chamber, it looked like a dollar store version of when Kylo Ren and Rey were fighting the Imperial Guards after Snoke got killed. Like right down to sharing a weapon it was, and just it was just yeah. Not to keep shitting on the movie. We've been doing that all night, but
You
or
guys
on
have been
the
doing
show.
that all night. Because
No, it's
once
the weed.
again, I liked that scene simply because it showed that, because there's always been that, like, since she was introduced in the credit thing, there's been that question, is she a Loki? And I thought that was just another example of the way they fought that yes, she is a Loki. Much like how the scene you're talking about in Star Wars was supposed to tease, are they family?
Yeah.
Which that reveal of who she was is a letdown in the form of Rey. So, but yeah, I thought that scene did. I don't think it was necessary to show it because I think over and over again we'd seen that, but there's still people who don't
Yeah.
believe it's a Loki variant out there, and those people will probably be right because I will probably be wrong. But did you, Dan? I know you were deathly ill, so did you have time to think of a read rec for the folks, or?
I actually, I don't. I've just been reading kind of the same things. I've been going back and reading some old, some of the books I recommended when we started this show with the Loki books. I hadn't had a chance to reread them all. So I don't have any new recommendations. Just check out the ones I recommended in episode 1 of our Loki talk. They may answer some questions for some folks.
Cool. Tim, did you have one?
I don't have a specific one, but thinking about it over this past week, just read everything. Read everything to get a firm grasp of what you like and stuff that may surprise you as well. That's what this hobby is all about, is just expanding our imagination and seeing all these ridiculous places that these content creators can bring us to. And just read everything you can.
Awesome. I like that. I'm going to go with a novel again instead of a graphic novel because, as you guys know, I'm still trying to do the indie thing, and I just haven't been able to pick anything up and start. But Beat the Reaper by this guy, Josh Bazell, and it's fitting. Dr. Peter Brown is an intern at Manhattan's worst hospital. He has a talent for medicine, a shift from hell, and a past he'd prefer to keep hidden. Pietro Brana is a hitman for the mob with a genius for violence, well-earned fear of sharks, and an overly close relationship with the Federal Witness Protection Program. Because if that didn't give it away, they are the same person, and he's a former mob hitman who goes into medicine. And of course, if you've seen a movie, you know that catches up to him. Dan might not like it because there's no big ending. It's just a mob guy trying to completely shake the mob. But Josh Bazell, brilliant guy. This would be like a pop crime novel more than like a heady thing, but really, really fun. There's a sequel to this, Wild Things, which is also kind of great, and it sees into the woods and it goes more of a supernatural aspect. But if you are a fan of like crime comics, I think you would love Josh Bazell because it's a quick read, much like how a comic book is. You're not going to get pretty pictures. You're just going to have to paint them in your head. But real fun read. I picked up on a whim. My brother also loves it. Our friend of the pod, Buck, he's also a fan of Josh Bazell's too. So since, as Buck pointed out, we just shared everything back in the day. So that'll be my reading recommendation. Beat the Reaper.
Nice.
All right, guys. As much as you guys hated on a show I'm loving, it still was a pleasure to talk to you guys. I enjoy it so much.
Always.
Thank you guys so much, especially you, Dan, who's fighting the fever to be here with us.
Yeah, I'm going to go die now.
Well, as long as you can resurrect by next Monday.
Here's hoping.
All right. Good night, guys.
Have a good night.